explaining the cosmology of Bleach. This video was requested through donation to our channel. If you'd like to request your own video, please use this Discord link. The collective world of Bleach is a complex and fascinating structure, with countless dimensions of varying sizes, some as small as a room and others extending to infinity. In this video, we'll explore the realms of Bleach all the way back to the primordial world. Let's get into it. The average fanbase map of the Bleach cosmology is generally accurate in most of their depictions. The Dangai is a region between the living world and the soul society, but still disconnected from both, and Hueco Mundo is also a world relatively between both of them. There are also countless valleys of screams scattered around them, and all of these realms exist within an infinite structure called the Garganta. There are also other realms like Hell, Mugen and Royal Palace, as well as Soul Society's western branch, in reverse London of Soul Society. Let us begin with the world with the most impact, the Soul Society. As it is with some of the other realms, the term Soul Society refers to more than one thing. It can refer to the society itself and the structures on the surface of the planet, as it can be defined as that which is made up of the Serete, the Shinigami country, and the districts of Rukongai. Rukongai is made of 4 divisions with 80 districts each, and despite the memes, life in Rukongai doesn't have to be as bad as you think. As you might recall, districts are numbered from 1 to 80 in each direction, but the districts closer to the Serete are more peaceful and prosperous. For example, Yuichi, the soul who was once trapped in the parakeet, lives in a more peaceful area. Strangers even come together to form families. Due to the way Shinigami randomly relocates souls when they arrive in the Soul Society, the Shiba's residence is also located in the Rukongai, and just like planet Earth, you'll find mountainous areas, villages, and so on. After district number 50, the quality of life drops significantly, meaning more poverty and violence. In fact, a study shows that no resident past district 58 owns a sandal. And for your information, Byakuya's scarf, which he wears around his neck, is expensive enough to buy 10 mansions. Man, Renji should have taken that scarf and sold it. But this video isn't so much about the socio-economic state of the Soul Society, so let's move on. The innermost structure of Soul Society, the Serete. Now, the Serete has been described as a city or a cityscape. However, in terms of actual size, it's way bigger than you think, and it's never really drawn to scale. The Serete is actually so massive it's more comparable to a large country. There are 4 gates surrounding the circular structure at each cardinal point, and the distance between each gate is a 10-day walk, even for characters who can run for 7 days straight without taking a break. Serete is also large enough to contain actual cities inside it, and even the 13th Division training ground is shown to have hills or mountains behind it. And even for Komamura's nephews, the Wolfmen children, despite them already being inside the Serete, they would have had to travel over mountainous regions to reach the 7th Squad. Furthermore, from the Bleach movie Fade to Black, which holds the same accuracy as the manga, we learn that 200 spirit miles is roughly a third of the Serete. Therefore, the diameter of Serete is consistently comparable to a large country. And of course, it contains many infrastructure for all the divisions, with enough space for additional departments like the Punishment Force, and even their Maggot's Nest, the Research and Development Department, and even their underground prison consisting of 8 levels, with the lowest being Mugen. Inspired by the Avicii hell from Buddhism, it is in fact the 8th and lowest level of hell. In the context of Bleach, it is the prison, which contains Sosuke, Aizen, and other immortals, those whose hearts cannot be stopped, in a space of complete darkness and without food. As for the size of the Mugen, it is infinitely large. The conflict of size comes from the Bleach databook 13 Blades, which is often translated as being so large that it creates the illusion of infinity. However, the kanji can also be broken down to its infinite size makes you dizzy. This screenshot is from Manifested Favors video, make sure you check him out. Now, to add more credence to the infinite size Mugen, in the correct manga translation and the recent revised version of Thousand Year Blood War, Unohana calls it infinite. And the French translation of the Japanese also translates to a closed off world whose infinite expanse makes you dizzy. And the novels also mention infinitely spreading darkness and infinite shadows, and makes use of the literal Japanese term for infinity, which is Mugen. And finally, Unohana's description of Mugen has nothing to do with her perception in the context of the statement, as the correct statement was, just as the word sounds, its extent is equivalent to infinity. This is also consistent with the nature of names within the Bleach universe. Soul Society also has a western branch, which is located in Reverse London. And yes, this is from Burn the Witch, which exists in the same universe as Bleach. Reverse London is, as its name suggests, the inverted version of London. But despite them being reversed, it is implied that they have a strong connection. It is implied that if you destroy a building in Reverse London, the inverted version of that same building in the real London will also be destroyed as a result. And their version of the Gotei 13 is called Wingbind, and instead of managing hollows, they manage dragons. In London, 72% of all deaths is caused by dragons. This is why the Wingbind organization exists to suppress their existence. Normal residents of the real-world version of London, also called Front London, are unable to perceive dragons. Creatures of all types of natures which can command a great deal of power. Some are good for resources like textiles, and some can even generate electrical power. In terms of size, Reverse London should be comparable to London, as they both seem to overlap in size and infrastructure, and as such is implied to be extremely massive. Ryokyu, or Royal Palace. And now we're entering into the dimensional context of Soul Society, as Ryokyu or Royal Palace is located in the Soul Society in its own dimensional space. A different dimensional space accessible by the Oken or Royal Key. The Oken refers to the hair and bones of Squad Zero members modified by the power of the Soul King. In a sense, the Royal Guards themselves are the Oken. For each Squad Zero captain, their very spiritual power is fused with the Soul King's palace through the Oken. The Royal Palace is isolated from the city by 72 barriers, which cannot be closed for 6,000 seconds after being breached by the Oken. Furthermore, the distance between the city and Royal Palace is so massive that it's roughly a week's travel with normal Shunpo. And even if we downplay Ichigo's travel time to roughly 2 hours, it still equates to billions of meters or hundreds of millions of miles, which is larger than the distance between the sun and the earth, which could translate to Royal Palace having its own breathable space, which spans a massive distance and connects the city to its own atmosphere or airspace. And since Royal Palace does not exist within the Rukongai or the city, but still exists in the Soul Society, this would have to be a more spatial or dimensional Soul Society, which takes us to the next contextual definition of Soul Society, where it is at least compared to a chunk of the universe, where it fills one side of the collapsing universe, and in the Thousand-Year Blood War drawing showing the same concept, it is presented as a side of the universe. Furthermore, in Can't Fear Your Own World, the Living World and Soul Society have been likened to the planets, with a pipeline between them known as a Dangai, and outer space being represented by the Garganta. Of course, this is not literal, as the Garganta is not actually outer space, as Shinigami can breathe and use reishi within it. In this symbolic comparison, the dimensions themselves are being compared to planets sitting in outer space. So in this context, again, the dimensions themselves are being referred to as Soul Society and the Living World. Another example of the dimensional Soul Society and Living World is a diagram used in Yoroichi's explanation, where the rectangles are labeled Soul Society and Living World. The Dangai is placed between them and the Valley of Screams around them, and the Garganta fills all the gaps between them, which is similar to the analogy from Can't Fear Your Own World. Furthermore, we have the end of chapter drawing from Kubo, which showed what would have happened if Yuha won, and depicted both sides of the universe with planets and celestial bodies held in balance, which is then destroyed, leading to despair. Therefore, the Soul Society and Living World are also dimensions, depending on the context in which they're used. Dimensional worlds with oceans of stars and other celestial bodies. Now that I've justified why the Royal Palace can still exist in Soul Society as a separate dimension, I should conclude by saying the entire space is the Royal Palace, and each of the floating discs are entire cities owned by each Zero Squad member. However, these cities can contain things even larger than cities. The geography of each base domain seems to consist of hills or mountains, and Nemaya has a literal sea on his floating domain, overlooked by a cliff. And Can't Fear Your Own World goes even crazier with this by calling it an ocean. The average sea is vast in both size and volume, and the average ocean even more so. And yet, Nemaya's city can hold an entire sea or ocean. Oh, the wonders of the Bleach universe. Next is the Shadow Empire of the Quincy. Following their defeat 1,000 years ago at the hands of the Gotei 13, using reishi particles, the Quincy's created spaces within the shadows of the Serete country. This hidden empire is also comparable to the Serete in size, since when it emerged from the shadows, it was able to overtake the entire Serete. This was an entire dimensional realm called the Bandenreich, created by the infinite power of reishi. And now, the Living World. The Living World and Soul Society are two sides of the same coin, parallel worlds. However, while the things in the Soul Society and Hueco Mundo, the spirit worlds, are made of reishi particles, the building blocks of the living world like atoms and molecules are known as kishi. You cannot exist in the spirit worlds with a kishi body. As such, human and spirit worlds must occupy different spaces. Earth is, for the most part, the same as ours, with similar religions like Buddhism, with jazz, Shakespeare, Superman comics, Japan, Tokyo, London, the theory of relativity. Except for the small additions made by Kubo, it's meant to mimic Earth, and the author seems to want to maintain chronological consistency with the real world, as he called out his own inconsistency with the time period for jazz, and mentioned real-world contemporary figures like John Travolta. The Living World of Bleach also has identical astrology to the real world, so the same visible sky with its constellations should be present in Bleach. It is the author's intent for the art, culture, people, and human knowledge to be consistent with the real world, and this is noteworthy because the people of the living world, with similar instruments that we possess possess in real life view their dimension as a universe. There are mentions of things like the sun, the moon, distant galaxies within the context of the story, the same astrological sphere and constellations, and while the three realms were once a part of the same universe, in the context of Bleach it's like saying heaven, the real universe, and hell were once one. And as shown before, the real world also has the same dimensional concept as the Soul Society. And even with absolute lowball, it's still multi-galactic in size. And again, we do see that the scale of both worlds holds multiple celestial bodies in balance. Like the other two realms, Hueco Mundo is both a planet and a dimension. The Thousand-Year Blood War keyword defines the space or dimension itself as Hueco Mundo. In the heavens of Hueco Mundo, there is a moon which shows the opposite of that which is in the living world, and a planet mostly covered by desert. In the planetary context, Hueco Mundo itself is mostly covered by sand, and like other planets has an atmosphere, but in this case, one with more reishi concentration than even the Soul Societies. Like other worlds, in one context it's a planet, and in others it's a space or dimension. Hueco Mundo has a forest of Menos Grande, and is a world with nations and even villages of hollows. It once contained Las Noches, a massive structure, which even with lowball is comparable to an island, taking 3 days to walk from the side of Ichigo's entrance to the front gate. Even while downplaying Nell, who is able to keep pace with adults, and even catch up to a running Ichigo, and even sprint across the sands of Hueco Mundo with no problem, making Las Noches a massive structure. In fact, it's so large that characters who run towards it cannot perceive its proper dimensions even while running for days, as they could sprint through the Dangai for 7 days but got tired on their way to Las Noches. On the inside, the fortress mimics daylight, but it doesn't possess a real star or a real sky. But even massive towers which extend far into the space cannot be seen from other locations. The Dangai Precipice World is a dimension, which can also be defined as a hyperspace or subspace between the two worlds, acting as a point of separation and tunnel for travel between the world of the living and Soul Society. It is a space-time which is disconnected from the space and time of the other worlds, surrounded by layers and layers of time streams, which makes its flow of time 2,000 times denser than the other two worlds. It has a restrictive currents or koryu which swallow spirit bodies, and the cleaner or kototsu, an entity of reason or a part of the natural law of the Dangai Precipice World, which can throw you centuries into time if it chases you, as a result destroying you with the rapid flow of time. It's also immune to spiritual pressure and spirit energy. Furthermore, the Dangai Precipice World, with all its branches, is large enough to contain all the souls of the Valley of Screams. Enough souls to make up an entire dimension, as they first accumulated in the Dangai Precipice World before joining to make the Valley of Screams. And its walls are strong enough to withstand the explosion of an entire Valley of Screams. And now for the Valley of Screams, or Kyogoku. As souls travel across the realms in the cycle of transmigration, some souls stray from this path, and over time they join together to form entire dimensions called Valleys of Screams, or Kyogokus. Some Kyogokus can be as small as a room, while others are entire spacetimes, as featured in the Memories of Nobody movie, formed from blank souls which have lost their memories, and large enough to contain their own star, evident by daylight, atmosphere, and temperatures, and the ground with enough gravity to allow the Soul Reapers and Ichigo to move with the same ease as they do on Earth or in the Soul Society. In other words, the ground beneath their feet must possess the mass of a planet. The space can liquefy as a result of the Kido cannon affecting it. In Bleach, space can be burnt, shattered like glass, or even frozen, and it was already confirmed to be an actual space-time. Now there are countless Kyogokus scattered in the Garganta. Next, we have 3 more afterlife realms in the Bleach universe which have not been explored. First is the Quincy's afterlife, which does exist, as noted by the author in Club Outside, in a realm different from Soul Society. And second is the Beast realm, to which Sajin Komamura and his Wolfman clan were sent for punishment. For giving in to their passions, they were sent to the Hell of Beasts. And the third and final is Jigoku, or Hell. Hell butterflies are closely tied with Hell itself, and the presence of Hell spawns a substance like droplets called phosphoplasm. Hell has massive gates which lead into its domain, and seems to spawn titanic or massive beasts. Hell spawns which are similar to Hollows but seem to lack spiritual pressure. It also has guards which seem to possess some kind of clairvoyance, and is a final resting place for human beings who commit evil acts before they became Hollows, as the Zanpakuto of Shinigami can only purify the sins that Hollows commit during their time as Hollows. There are also other gateways which lead to Hell, as demonstrated by Kazui, Ichigo's weird kid. In Hell, it's possible for hollow holes to be transported outside the body, and negative emotions liquefy and leak from the ears. The reishi of captains which contain too much spiritual pressure cannot be reabsorbed by the Soul Society's soil, and a ceremony called Konso Reisai must be performed 12 years after their funerals, and unknowingly to most Soul Reapers, this ceremony actually casts the captain's souls into Hell. In Hell form, they seem to obtain larger bodies, as evident by Ukitake's sword. Furthermore, a great deal of spiritual pressure is necessary to hold down the gates of Hell, enough to counteract the spiritual pressure within the dimension, otherwise the gates will be flung open, and the contents of Hell will be exposed to the rest of the realms, destroying the balance between them. Next, we have Dondochaka's dimension. Dondochaka's ability allows him to connect to a different dimensional space. This allows him to swallow objects which are even larger than himself, and Kubo stated that this is possible because he's probably connected to the 4th dimensional space. At the bare minimum, this tells us that within the cosmology of Bleach, it is possible for other spaces, such as a 4th dimension, to exist. Not the temporal dimension of time, but spaces with other dimensional properties. And finally, the primordial universe. To recreate the primordial universe, everything would have to crumble and disappear. This includes the 3 realms consisting of the planets and outer space. Even the stars and planets are shown to crumble in that potential future. Even the Garganta, which is a space-time which contains the realms, which like the Soul Society and Hueco Mundo has different meanings, being the opening used to enter other worlds, but is also the entirety of the massive dark space which holds the other realms, which also has a different time axis from the other realms, which all have a different time axis from each other. And in the case of the Garganta, it is infinitely large, meaning that realms like the world of the living, which some characters compare to a universe, are infinitesimal dots compared to the Garganta. But even this massive Garganta would collapse with the other realms to reform the primordial world. In fact, when the Soul King died, the quaking was so immense that it could be felt even in Mugen, another infinite-sized realm which is also cut off from the Soul Society. These space-times with their matter and energy would collapse and return to the primordial soup, or primordial sea, a world which even Ichibei, who had first-hand experience, described as all of creation. So all of creation, all of the cosmology of Bleach was a part of this primordial world, ruled by the Soul King. But there were no separate dimensions for life and death, as these would later be forged by the Soul King's power. The primordial sea could give birth to matter, energy, space-time, and even concepts, as Ichibei and his powers were born from this. All could emerge from the primordial ocean. And so as for the overall size of the Bleach cosmology, with countless valleys of screams which could even be large enough to contain stars, the 3 realms of existence which together make up a universe, with some of these realms like the world of the living being described as the universe in itself. And since this universal structure would be an infinitesimal point within the Mugen or the Garganta, which are both infinite, the Bleach cosmology is a structure capable of holding infinite universes. And for this infinity, there are infinite possible futures. Be sure to like and subscribe and leave a comment. Thank you again for the donation, and cheers.